I have remained with my fingers in education for really the last 20 years. But this is going to be quite a different level of immersion.
Bart Peterson, a born and bred Hoosier with a passion for education that goes back to his days 20 years ago as mayor of Indianapolis, and now serving as the leader of Crystal House International. A North Central High School graduate, a lawyer, two-term mayor who not only championed charter schools during his time in office, but also led efforts to consolidate law enforcement, boosted arts and cultural initiatives, and piloted numerous downtown development projects. Get to know more about former Indianapolis Mayor Bart Peterson in this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Well, Bart Peterson is an Indianapolis guy, born and raised in Indy, North Central High School, Purdue University, and then law school at the University of Michigan, which he describes as one of the most important formative experiences of his life. He would pursue politics instead of his family's construction business, and in 1999 was elected the 47th mayor of Indianapolis. He served 2 terms, was the first mayor in the nation to authorize public charter schools. He also oversaw the consolidation of the Marion County Sheriff and Indianapolis Police Departments. He boosted the city's arts and cultural scene and also led several downtown development projects. He lost a bid for a 3rd term as mayor, one of the state's biggest political upsets. After leaving the mayor's office, he went on to serve at Harvard University's Institute of Politics and as an executive at Eli Lilly and Company before returning to his love for education, currently serving as president and CEO of Crystal House International. And I'm very pleased to welcome to the podcast this week, Bart Peterson. Bart, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Nice to see you. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, good to see you. How's life?
Oh, life is really good right now. Obviously, we have the shadow of a pandemic still over us, but the light is at the end of the tunnel. And for me and for Crystal House, things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, talk a little bit about Crystal House for those who may not know. Of course, many have heard of the name of Crystal DeHaan, the late incredible businesswoman, philanthropist, someone who just made an incredible difference, not only here in Indiana, but around the globe with Crystal House International. Talk about the organization and what it's all about.
Well, she was a phenomenal human being. Crystal went down to Mexico in 1998 at the invitation of a longtime friend. And I'll kind of skip forward to say that that experience led her to want to create a school, which ultimately became a K through 12 school, and the very first Crystal House, which opened in the late 1990s. And we now have 8 schools around the world, one in Mexico, the original one in Cape Town, South Africa, 2 in India, 1 in Jamaica, and then 3 charter schools right here in the heart of Indianapolis.
And these schools really do focus on impoverished children and really giving them a path for their futures.
That's right. Crystal believed from that very first visit to Mexico that to break the cycle of poverty, to give somebody a chance to, as she put it, have a seat at the table of life, you had to do more than just provide an education. It was education plus character education plus nutrition and healthcare, family support, and then ultimately what is one of the signature components of the Crystal House model, a 5-year college and careers program where we stick with the students after they graduate from high school for 5 years, helping them in every way imaginable to make it through either a 4-year university, if they choose a 2-year program, or even a certificate program. We stick with them regardless of what they choose and on into their at least their first year in the workforce. And it's a really unique model. I've not seen anything quite exactly like Crystal House. I was enamored when I first met Crystal, when I first learned about Crystal House, and it's now my honor to try in a small way to carry on her legacy.
As mentioned earlier, you were a champion of charter schools while you were in the mayor's office. Now in this role, is education, is it really your passion?
It is. It's It's what took me from being just sort of a kid without a lot of direction. It opened up a world for me reading, learning subjects that particularly interested me in school, which was at that time not all of them. But the ones that sparked my imagination really opened up a broader world to me. And now I came from a comfortable background, a comfortable middle class background. The kids we serve have so many more obstacles to overcome. And when you see them do that with assistance, but when you see them come into their own and find themselves through the holistic education model that Crystal House is, there's nothing more satisfying than that. So yes, it really is a passion for me based on my own background, but even more so being able to help people who didn't have the advantages that I did growing up.
Yeah, you mentioned you weren't necessarily a motivated learner early on. Talk about that. I think you were really interested. You wanted to be an athlete, and early on in high school, you didn't you didn't maybe put as much effort into school as maybe you should have.
I not only did I not put enough effort into school, I didn't put enough effort into being an athlete. Now, I'm pretty sure that would not have made a difference because I was not endowed with a lot of athletic ability, just a lot of interest in sports. But one of my early lessons, and it came painfully over a number of years, was just you really have to work at things. I sort of figured if I wasn't natural at something, well, then I wasn't meant to do it. So I just quit and started on something else. And then if I wasn't natural at that, I quit and started on something else. And it was probably my greatest regret in life was some of the things that I quit back then. Because if I just worked at them a little bit, I might have been at least competent. And school was one of those things. Thankfully, I woke up in time from that slumber to start to apply myself late in high school and thereafter. But it's I've given a lot of speeches to a lot of young people, and I always confess my own sins first and foremost.
That's good. That's good. As I mentioned, you grew up in Indianapolis. This is your home. Your dad, Pete Peterson, was really a self-made guy, came to Indianapolis in the late 40s, became a masonry contractor, and ultimately ended up developing so much of what is now Castle and Commercial Park in that area on the north side. What do you remember about your dad, the family business, and growing up in that environment?
I just remember my dad being obsessed with work, but not as in a bad way like that sounds, because he was very much a family man too. But he really lived and breathed his work, and he came from a very poor background. He was an entrepreneur from day one. He was, his mother grew asparagus in the backyard. He would cut it down, package it up, and go sell it in the neighborhood. And I remember him telling me late in life, we had a lot of long conversations when he was in his last couple of years. I remember him telling me that the way he sold asparagus was not to talk about the asparagus to the neighbors, but to talk about his goals. That if he sold enough asparagus, he could get a bike. And he got his customers to buy into his vision of what the future looked like. And they bought the asparagus whether they wanted to or not, because they wanted to help him out. So he was a go-getting entrepreneur from the very beginning. Didn't go to college. As he puts it, barely graduated from high school. I'm sure that's a bit of an exaggeration, but just started working as a bricklayer, block layer at the age of 18, and really was a sort of a true American business success story.
Yeah. Did you ever consider going into the family business or following that path?
I actually did spend a few years in the family business after I was chief of staff to Evan Bayh when he was governor. I went into the family business for about 4.5 years, and I was actually in the family business when I was elected mayor. I've always loved the family business, and it's always been very good to me, but I don't think I had a huge amount of aptitude in the real estate space. My father and brother were truly gifted in that regard. I love the business. I love the business side of the business, but I was not an expert in real estate the way they were. And ultimately, my passion was in public service and some of the policy areas that I've followed on. And that's ultimately where I decided I wanted to branch out to after I spent a few years in the business.
And you really considered your parents as your greatest teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting with values, I think about my mother's still living and is still thankfully in good health. My father passed away about almost 7 years ago, but they instilled in me the values that drive me today, that carry me today, I should say, and really that sort of no nonsense work ethic. I remember we would after church, we would drive when my father was building the Castleton office park. So this would have been in the mid to late 70s. We'd leave church and we would go. He'd say he wanted to take a quick pass through the park. Well, we all groaned and moaned. We knew that meant about 2 hours sitting in the car while he looked at every single thing from every angle. But he was literally the kind of person. This sounds like a made up story, but he'd stop in the middle of the road and get out and pick up a cigarette butt that was sitting in the middle of the road that he had
Wow.
just paved 6 weeks earlier. He had a great attention to detail and hard work, but he also had a ton of personality as well. And like I said, that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. But I think that drive, I have a very different drive than he does, but I think that drive to sort of maybe a little toward perfectionism, but to try to achieve things is due to both him and my mother. And my mother, sort of the carrier of the values along with my dad, but the great teacher of values. I think more about the kind of person my parents made me far more than what specific things they ever taught me. It's more about the type of human being you are. And I've always believed that's the foundation for everything.
Yeah.
And by the way, that Crystal believed that as well. And one of the foundations of Crystal House is character education being as important as the academic program. And that's non-ideological character. I mean, this isn't about a particular viewpoint. It's about universal values and being a good person and being a good citizen and helping others and being grateful. These are things Crystal deeply believed in as well. And you see that when you walk through any Crystal House anywhere in the world.
Yeah. After high school, North Central, you went to Purdue and then on to law school at Michigan. And you described that Michigan experience as really a defining experience for you, something that was really, really a formative experience. How so?
Well, I was a political science major in college, and I don't want to give away any secrets, but political science is really a fun thing to major in. all my friends that, I went to Purdue, so all my friends were engineers. They were all in engineering. They're all working their tails off every minute of every day, and I'm reading 19th century Russian novels for classes, right? I had a blast. I thought school was easy and rewarding.
Yeah.
But I got to law school and I got my comeuppance because that was my version of engineering school. It was really tough. It was painful. Every lawyer or every new law student will tell you the same thing. You sit down to read a law school case and you think, this is going to be fun. And when you're about 2 pages into it, you realize this isn't going to be fun, and this is what I'm going to be doing every minute for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
But that stick-to-itiveness and that resilience that I did not have when I was younger, and that I was, learning to gain as I finished high school, went into college, it really took root in law school because I had to plow through that. I didn't enjoy the academic side of it all that much. I came to tolerate it. I didn't ever love it, but I came to tolerate it. But it was tough, hard work, and it made me realize, I think probably for the first time, you got to pay dues. You want to be good at something, you got to pay your dues. And that was a lesson I needed to learn. And I got it from law school very well. And I went off to practice law for almost 6 years with a big law firm downtown. Again, I worked harder than I'd ever worked at anything before. And, I liked a lot of it. There was a lot of it that was just a grind, but you can't quit. You just got to stick to it. And as you stick to it, you get better and better. And the better you are at something, the more you like it. And those were lessons that came to me maybe a little later in life than for a lot of other people. But they took root very, very well. And I think they've helped me just sort of deal with the ups and downs of life that are inevitable, professional life and personal life, I suppose. But I've had more probably ups and downs in my professional life. And you build a certain level of resilience if you've been through something that feels a little like battle.
Mhm.
And law school felt a little like battle to me. Now, on the social side, I had a great time.
That's good.
So
And still have a lot of friends from Michigan, right?
yeah, many of my close friends from all over the country are from my law school class. We do a Zoom call every Sunday night right now. We started during the pandemic and have kept it up. So
That's great. So you mentioned you came back to Indy, practiced law, and then kind of turned to public service, turned to politics. Ultimately, you became chief of staff for Evan Bayh in the governor's office. What did you always anticipate you would be in politics, in public service? Was there something or someone that drove you in that direction?
I was always very interested in it. So, before I started kind of dropping off in my academic performance in school, I read biographies. We'd get assigned a biography of a president or something, no one else would want to read it. I would want to read it twice, then I'd want to go get another one and read it on my own. I was always very interested in politics and government. I remember being on a family vacation in 1968. I was 10 years old, and I think we were in Florida, and everybody else was out, side the pool or something, and I'm watching the Democratic National Convention on TV. That just shows you how. Not that I was such a Democrat. It was that a political convention was fascinating to me at the age of 10. But I never thought I would get in, that I would actually do anything in it. I actually never really thought that I would. I didn't know how to. I didn't know anybody in politics when I was younger. It's not like I grew up in a politically active family or anything like that. So I kind of fell into it in my first or second year of practicing law. I got involved. I remember going to see Evan Bayh speak when he was thinking about running for Secretary of State. I got a little tiny bit involved in a gubernatorial campaign in 1984. And so that's where my interest built. My interest was there, I should say, but that's where my experience built.
Mm-hmm. And your friendship, your connection, your relationship with Evan Bayh, that didn't predate your really working for him. Where did that relationship start?
Well, I think it was in very early 1985. I had started to get involved a little bit, and I went to see him speak at a breakfast where he was talking about potentially running for Secretary of State of Indiana. And I just went up and shook his hand after that and did a little bit of work on his campaign. I'm not certain at the end of that campaign he would have even known who I was, but at the beginning of his gubernatorial campaign, which started pretty quickly thereafter, I volunteered to be his policy guy on environmental issues because I was practicing environmental law at the time. And in that capacity, I did get to know him much better. I got to know all the people around him who are, my close political friends to this day. I remember it was the current mayor who I went to speak about being the volunteer to do environmental issues for the campaign. So I took Joe Hogsett to lunch. This would have been about the middle of 1987. And I said, if there's a campaign, because Evan had not announced he was going to run. I said, if there's a campaign, I want to be the person who oversees the development of policy positions and all that kind of thing on environmental issues, because I have this experience. That's the area that I work in. And I thought he was going to tell me that, there are about 15 other people who want to do the same thing. We'll see how you guys, we'll have a little competition, see who's up to it. That's what I expected, because I had prepared all night for this lunch with Joe. Well, instead, before I could even finish my sentence, he said, "Done, you got it, you're it." So I spent a lot of time on that, and I was a lot of the ideas that I and a group of about a dozen of us who were working on those issues came up with ended up becoming law. Ended up going into bills in the first session of the General Assembly after he took office, and many of them became law. And I'm kind of excited about that even now, thinking back on it.
And that would have been, I would assume, kind of in the early days, at least here in Indiana, of a focus on environmental issues and policies.
It was a huge time for that. People who weren't around or weren't adults then probably wouldn't remember, but 1989 and 1990 were huge. The Exxon Valdez ran aground in Alaska and spilled oil all over all over the place. President Bush, the first President Bush, came up with the idea of, you might recall, acid rain was a big issue, and he came up with the idea of emissions trading, which everybody thought was crazy, but now has become a very common thing. It was the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. Well, nobody had paid any attention to Earth Day since the first one, but the 20th anniversary just blew up and became this huge event. And all of a sudden I found myself still kind of a kid doing TV interviews and whatnot about environmental issues because they were kind of number one on people's priority list. That didn't last very long, but for about a year, it was a pretty heady thing to be involved with.
Interesting. Bart, each episode of the podcast, we do what we call a little 2-minute drill where I ask some quick questions of you and get your quick answers. Are you up for the task?
Sure.
Okay, good. Well, let's start with pet peeve. What's your biggest pet peeve?
This is a fresh one in my mind. When I put my garbage can out or my recycling can, and people take doggy waste bags and throw them in there.
Oh my gosh!
Else's trash can.
Really?
Drives me crazy.
Do you have? Does Amy, your wife, say you have any annoying quirks?
Yeah, I am the world's best dishwasher loader, and she is almost perfect in every single way except for that. And so I more frequently than I care to admit will unload the dishwasher after she's done it and reload it my way.
Oh boy, that's good.
She just shakes her head and walks away.
What's the one thing that really motivates you?
I've always believed that we just have this one chance at life, that we were blessed to have an opportunity to have life, to be in this world, and that we ought to do something important with it. And everything that I've done since I sort of rediscovered my ambition, I guess, in my late teens, early 20s, has been around trying to do something that matters, something that lasts, something that is consequential. And I've just always had this fear that I would be laying there on my deathbed. I used to think it was, at 65, and then I've upped that now to about 95 or 105. But I'd be laying there and I'd just say that I kind of wasted my chance. I didn't work hard enough. I didn't stay with something enough. I didn't, I got lazy and I got comfortable and I just didn't do something that mattered. So that's always motivated me to try to make a difference.
Yeah. Dog or cat?
Dog. Although I like cats too. I'm not an anti-cat person.
Favorite way to relax?
We bought a place up in northern Michigan about 15 years ago, and being there just puts me in my happy place.
Favorite TV sitcom?
I always loved Cheers. Now, I talked about people doing consequential things. Nobody on Cheers ever really did anything terribly consequential.
Right.
But I love the community.
Yes.
To me, community is everything, and I love the community on Cheers.
That was a great one. I like that one too. What was your first job?
I worked at the O'Malia grocery store in Home Place, which is that little, enclave, which may or may not be part of Carmel now. I'm not sure, but it's just across 96th Street. And it was not too far from where I lived. And I was a grocery bagger and doing my apprenticeship to become a stock boy. And I made $1.10 an hour. It was,
wow.
I was living large.
Living large, I'll bet, yeah. Bucket list sporting event that you have yet to attend?
Well, that's a great one. I guess probably a World Series. I've never been to a World Series game.
Final one here, Bart. 2 or 3 people you would most like to have dinner with, either living or deceased. Those 2 or 3 people you'd love to have at your table.
I've thought about this before. I would say Robert Caro. He's the guy who's been writing a multi-volume history or biography of LBJ and kind of elevated LBJ to the mythical status he has these days. I've been reading the third volume of the trilogy that Hilary Mantel wrote about the era of Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell, which is fascinating. And I'm also reading Barack Obama's memoir right now, and his presidential memoir. And what I think those 3 have in common is they're great writers, and great writers of biography or history or historical fiction tend to be, or regular fiction tend to be great thinkers and very interesting. I mean, you just tell that these are fascinating people. But these folks, you can tell they're really thoughtful, engaging people.
Very good. Great job on the 2-minute drill, Bart. We have a lot more we want to get to with you, including obviously your time as mayor. That's when we return on the Business and Beyond podcast. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. Very happy to have as my guest this week, Bart Peterson, the former mayor of Indianapolis, the current head of Crystal House International here in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis-based organization that has a global impact. Bart, as we continue, you talked before the break about serving as Evan Bayh's chief of staff, and that really launched you on a political path and running for mayor. That was in 1999. What was the thought process? What really drove you to that decision to run for mayor?
Well, I felt like I really wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like I really wanted to do something that mattered. And I started to think after I'd been in state government for a while. I knew politicians. I knew that they, as the old saying goes, that they put their pants on one leg at a time, and there was nothing magical about success in politics. It was like anything else. You had to work at it. You had to have some talent. You had to work at it. I didn't know whether I had any talent, but I knew that I could work hard. And I also knew that I would be passionate about doing the work. I'd outwork anybody else, given the chance. And I thought, being mayor of my hometown, place that I love, I was pretty analytical about it. I recognized that we hadn't elected a Democrat as mayor in 32 years, but that the county was changing, that I looked back at a lot of races and concluded that it was possible to win. It would be a bit of a long shot, but it was possible. But mostly I was driven by just a belief that I could do a really good job at it if I could get elected. And I just didn't know whether I'd be any good as a politician because I'd never done anything like that before. And I'm sure that I was pretty bad at first, but, I stuck with it and I got better and better and it all worked out.
Did you enjoy it? Did you really?
First of all, I loved politics. I think probably others who start into politics think the same thing. They think, well, campaigning is sort of part, it's the painful part to get to where you want to be. And that's the way I thought of it. I thought, I think I'd be a good mayor, but I don't know whether I'd be a good politician. And I don't think I would like being a politician or running for office. Well, it turned out I loved it. I loved that part of it. As I think back on it, I wouldn't trade my days as mayor for anything. I really miss those days of campaigning. Campaigning is really fun. And the community that you build, the fascinating array of people that you get to meet, the fact that it's really single-minded. There's something about kind of being able to shove everything else out of your mind and just focus on one thing, which is that election day and working tirelessly to get to election day. I miss that. I ended up enjoying it a lot. I don't have a great desire to go back to it. I think it's uglier today than it was then, which is not that, it's not like I'm, part of ancient history or anything, but politics has changed a lot since that first campaign I ran in 1999.
Would you think you would have run for mayor in this environment? I mean, because you're right, it has changed so dramatically and it's gotten so, for lack of a better term, so ugly in so many ways.
Yeah, it would be a hard choice, simply because probably one major thing. I don't think at the local level it's still the way it was when I was in office, when I ran, which is it's less partisan and less polarized than state government and ultimately federal government, which is the most polarized. So it's still attractive in that way, in that, it's not a, holy war between Democrats and Republicans at the local level. But the rise of social media is the biggest difference. I think not being able to control the viral spread of misinformation and whatnot would be the hardest thing for me to adapt to, because that really was just in its infancy back when I was in office. In fact, such an infant that I didn't even really notice it.
Mm-hmm, yeah. among your accomplishments in that first term was the establishment of charter schools. Well, why was that such an important issue to you?
I believe that the education landscape in Indianapolis was again, to go back to the word polarized, not politically in the same way as Democrats and Republicans, but it was very polarized, and we needed something different. And I believe that charter schools were almost the perfect middle ground. And here I am. This is 22, 23 years later, and I still believe the same thing. They're the perfect middle ground between the sort of staid, old, bureaucratic, traditional large school districts on the one hand, which have trouble sort of being light on their feet, sort of a business-like takeover of education and having education, kind of the alternative. Let me back up a little bit. What I was really trying to say was, back then when I was running the education community, the IPS in particular, believed that the business community was trying to tell them everything to do because they didn't think they had enough smarts to figure anything out. And the business community thought that that the education community wasn't doing things enough in a business-like way. Well, I felt like both of those extremes were wrong. You can't run a school like a business. It's not a business. But you also can't run an educational institution without better efficiency and organization and attention to your customer. And I felt that charter schools were the perfect middle ground in there, and I still do today.
You were reelected in 2003 with a big chunk, I think 63% of the vote. In that second term, you took on some big issues, consolidation of law enforcement agencies, also some big projects you oversaw with a new home for the Colts, expansion of the convention center. What do you remember most about that second term?
Another thing was dealing with the sewer problems of the city. The unglamorous side of things, but that was a lot of fun for me to try to figure out how to, with my team, try to figure out how to solve those long-standing wastewater problems that we had in Indianapolis. But I think the most high-profile and fun, I guess, was certainly doing the Colts deal. In part because it was such a fascinating puzzle. I mean, basically everybody was against us trying to, build a new football stadium and give a new deal to the Colts. Everybody was against it. I remember the Indianapolis Star editorializing against it. Literally, there wasn't anybody in favor of it. And we had to swing public opinion around about that. And it's a very, very long story about how we did it, but it was a fascinating process to the point where nobody really questions that deal anymore, and it came with a whole bunch of other stuff. We linked it with the convention center expansion, the building of the JW Marriott. Obviously Indianapolis would not be enjoying being the sole host of the NCAA basketball tournament with all this national and even international attention that we're getting right now if it weren't for the fact that we have this state-of-the-art football stadium, all these great hotels, which, go way back before me, and a great convention center. So that was a lot of fun, and but by no means was success assured with that one.
Yeah. Was there ever a time you doubted that it would happen?
I kind of didn't. And the reason I didn't is because I knew nobody wanted to lose the Colts. I knew that it would be an unpopular thing to do. I remember Steve Goldsmith telling me, because he had just gotten done with building what was then Conseco Fieldhouse, now Bankers Life Fieldhouse, right before I took office. And I remember him telling me, if you take a poll of people, let's take it to the Colts. If you take a poll of people and 80% of the group that you poll will say, for God's sakes, don't give a penny of public money to a professional sports team, period. And in the same poll with the same people, 80% will say, for God's sakes, do whatever it takes to keep the Colts here. Right?
Yeah.
So you can't win. It's a lose-lose proposition, but we had a lot going for us. The Colts were very popular then. They still are today, obviously. They were very popular on the field and off the field. We had Tony Dungy, who was just a a great man as the coaching face of the organization. We had Peyton Manning as the player face of the organization, and thankfully they even started winning. So we had a lot going in our favor. But I just felt like nobody, at the end of the day, nobody wanted to lose the Colts because they had become a big part of our identity. So I thought that one way or the other, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah, you had other big projects, Simon Property Group's headquarters, the Conrad, as we mentioned. Also, quickly, because I remember this too, where you really thought it was important to support the arts and cultural scene in Indianapolis, and really talked a lot about why that is so important to that quality of place, quality of life. And I think that's maintained on. I mean, I think that's Indianapolis. It's one of the great kept secrets, I think, in the city is that the vibrancy of the arts and cultural scene.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I give all kinds of credit to Kira Amstutz, who worked on my team, was a leader on my team, for encouraging that, and then she introduced me to a lot of people in the arts community. I was by no means a significant patron of the arts around Indianapolis prior to that time. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about everything as mayor, but the arts community and its importance to Indianapolis was one of the things that I started with a pretty low base on, and grew my knowledge a lot. And I think it was important to articulate that we're not trying to replace sports. We're trying to add to the variety of things that make Indianapolis special. And I think our arts community, which was always strong to begin with, it just sort of needed somebody to say, hey, you all really matter. I think they appreciated that. And the quality of their work is something that was always there. It just got exposed maybe a little bit more in our time.
You ran for a third term, 2007, which was obviously a very interesting year in politics in Indiana. The expectation was you would sail to that third term, but a number of issues, importantly, the property tax issue around the state of Indiana that caught up a lot of candidates, impacted your race. A newcomer to the political scene, Greg Ballard, came in and won in a huge upset. What do you remember about that experience? What kind of sticks out to you? I'm sure you have a lot of remembrances, but what sticks out to you about that process?
I don't remember anything really good about that experience. I will tell you, I expected to sail to victory as well, which is a good lesson for anybody in life that nothing's handed to you. Nothing worth having, at least, is handed to you, and you better not ever take anything for granted. I remember a lesson from, this is going to sound a little obscure, but I remember a lesson. I used to tell my staff this. I don't know why I didn't listen to it myself, but it was Germany back in the early 2000s, and Helmut Kohl had been the chancellor for 16 years, and he was running against a guy named Schroeder, and they interviewed people in the streets during the election campaign, and they said, what do you think of Chancellor Kohl? And everybody to a person said, great man, one of the great men of the 20th century. Fantastic. Who are you going to vote for? Oh, I'm voting for Schroeder. Why? He's one of the great men of the 20th. Why are you not voting for him? Yeah. Well, he's part of the past, right? We're talking about the future. Cole's talking about what he did in the past. and I think maybe I thought that what we had done in the past was a pathway to election in the future. And the reality was that it was a difficult time for a lot of reasons. I think I made a few mistakes too. But that's what happens. I mean, it's those things. I've been around politics enough to know that nothing is a guarantee in politics. And sometimes it doesn't work out the way you think it should. Was there a level of frustration that, as you saw, I assume during the campaign, the polls started going in the wrong direction, and you couldn't do anything about it? I mean, what? No, that's exactly right. I remember thinking everything I used to do that worked is not working anymore, politically. So yeah, it was an odd time. I think back on that because taxes were the issue, right?
You're right. Right.
Both property taxes, and we had a small local income tax increase also that added fuel to the fire. And I look back on that as sort of a little bit of an, early embers, if that's the right term, or early shoots of the Tea Party movement, where people just stopped trusting their government because they thought their government was trying to hurt them. And that's kind of what it felt like in that campaign. It was like, I don't want to listen to you because you're actively trying to hurt me. And so I don't really care what you have to say. And it was, and I think it really came to, more of a full bloom in 2010 when we saw people just sort of revolting against things that had been sort of accepted for quite a long time, weren't acceptable anymore. And we see that, pretty strongly today. There's anybody who thinks that that's just sort of a fringe attitude. It's really kind of part of America. It's that early "don't tread on me" kind of attitude. It stays underground for long periods of time, and then it comes out. And when it comes out, people think it's something weird and unusual. But we have a long strain of that in American history. And I'm not trying to make this too big a deal because it's just little old Indianapolis, but there was a sort of a taste of that sort of alienation from government that I felt.
Interesting. What's next for Bart Peterson as you look to the future? Obviously, you're ensconced in this very important work you're doing at Crystal House. But what's the future hold?
I just want to make sure that as I get older, that I don't bow to that pressure or desire to just get comfortable. I still fear that laying on my deathbed and thinking that I didn't give it my all. So I love what I'm doing now. I hope to be doing this for quite some time. I know I won't do it forever. There'll be a time when either I or somebody else will decide that I'm not doing it very well. And so I won't be doing it any longer. And I just hope I stay active in trying to serve my community and trying to do something that makes a difference in other people's lives, because there's nothing more satisfying than that. When I was mayor, it was not, all the big stuff we did, building stadiums, all that, nothing more satisfying than just doing one thing for one person because I had the power to do it. And so I still feel that way about everything.
Bart Peterson, you've been a difference maker, continue to be a difference maker for our city and our state. You're certainly a consequential mayor, doing great things. Really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. Great to see you here, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Gary. I appreciate it. Enjoy talking to you.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. You can check out all of our podcasts, as well as get Indiana business news 24/7 at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.